Hello, good morning, class. Those of you in the last class where we introduced the lecture ECN 201, we have been able to define microeconomics as the microscopic study of the entire economy. Just like the scientist who will take some samples. The scientist will take some samples, go into the lab and investigate from that sample to see how it affects the whole body. You understand? That is how microeconomics looks like. By the time they use the microscope to expand the sample and see the elements or the virus or whatever that is inside, or bacteria, and they see the damages it's causing and how it is causing it. It is in the same way in economics that microeconomics approach economic problems. They take a sample and then study it closely as though we are using microscope to analyze the sample, and then come up with findings on what is affecting or how the virus is affecting the body. Now, we may be talking about unemployment, for instance, and we say unemployment is one of the major causes of criminality or insecurity in the country. Then we might not be able to know completely if we do not take samples. And how do you take samples? You can look at, for instance, most of the criminals that were arrested, you understand? Most of the criminals that have been charged, that have been sentenced. So you can look at individual of these criminals and check if they are employed or not. You understand now? But it will be difficult for you to look at the whole criminals in Nigeria and study them and evaluate them. So, but when you take 1-2 criminal and you are able to study the criminal to find out that, okay, you don't have a job, you graduated so and so, you don't have family support, you don't have anyone who is supporting your family or anything like that, and you discover that, okay, due to lack of income, largely as a result of unemployment, this person ventured into criminality or into criminal act. Then you investigated another person, another criminal, and you found out that it is the same thing. You checked another one, you discover that they are almost the same. Then it becomes easier for you to conclude that unemployment results to criminality or criminal act or insecurity, and so on. So I'm saying this to help you understand the relevance of microeconomics as a whole. We'll say that this price of petrol has reduced the demand for petrol. Many people are no longer buying petrol. But you may not be too sure. You may not be too sure unless you carry out a microscopic study, look at some individuals and their purchase for petroleum products. What do? You can take maybe your household. Since the increase in price of petroleum from 150 something to 1,000 or whatever, how has your daily demand for petroleum reduced or increased? Then you check, you put it in a table. Then you go to another household. Since the increase in price of petroleum from 150 to 147 to 1,000, when it was 147, how many liters do you buy per day? And when it's now 1,000, how many liters do you buy per day? And you may not also be too sure if you only do your analysis. For instance, you just focus on the people in Benue State or in Kogi State. Maybe by the time you start, you discover that people in FCT, their reaction to the price of petroleum or petrol might differ to people in Benue, people in Nasarawa, and people in Kebbi. Yes. The changes in demand as a result of this change in price may differ. So, which is why it is very, very important to have this microscopic study so that you can come to a general conclusion. Very, very essential. This is what microeconomics does. So, we were able to talk about how the analysis is carried out in 3 stages, the various equilibrium points that is being established when you study microeconomics or when you carry out microeconomic analysis. So we plan to continue from the differences that exist between microeconomics and macroeconomics, because you cannot be explaining the meaning of microeconomics without intermittently bringing in how it is different from macroeconomics. In fact, in our last class, one of the things, approach that we are able to use to explain the meaning of microeconomics was when we constantly compare it to macroeconomics, where we said we are going to continue from to establish the distinction or the differences so that you will understand clearly. One of those differences is that, of course, from the definition, microeconomics studies individual units of an economy. Microeconomics studies individual units of an economy, while the macroeconomics studies the aggregate, the entire economy as a whole. Macroeconomics studies the economy as a whole and its aggregate. The second differences is that microeconomics deals with individual income, individual prices, individual outputs, etc. But macroeconomics deals with aggregates like national income, general prices, national output, etc. Now, you can now see the aggregates that we're talking about in the first difference, in the first point, that while microeconomics studied individual economic units, macroeconomics studied aggregate. Individual prices is like talking about price of tomato, price of pig milk, price of yam, price of petrol, price of car, price of motorcycles, and so on. But when we are talking about general prices, we are indirectly talking about a concept we refer to as inflation. Talk about individual income, we are talking about your salary, your wages, your stipend from your parent, your guardian, and so on. But when we are talking about the national income, we are talking about the overall income that accrued to the economy as a whole, which is an aggregation of all the income of all the individuals, all the firms, all the industries and companies and everything. They aggregate them. That is the national income we are talking about. In fact, both the income generated by the government, everything is added. You can see the difference now when we talk about individual income and when we talk about national income. So you read more. Then the third difference is that the central problem in microeconomics is price determination and allocation of resources. The central problem in microeconomics is price determination and allocation of resources. Remember, when we were introducing the class, we did mention about how prices are determined and resources are allocated effectively or efficiently and so on. Now, in macroeconomics, the central problem is determination of level of income and employment. Problem of microeconomics is price determination and allocation of resources. How do you determine the individual prices of a commodity, and how do you allocate the scarce resources among production of different goods? You understand? Then I now said in macroeconomics, its central problem is the determination of level of income and employment. The fourth difference is that the main tools of microeconomics are demand and supply of a particular good or factor. The main tools of microeconomics are demand and the supply of a particular good or factor. But in macroeconomics, the main tools are aggregate demand and aggregate supply of the economy as a whole. Aggregate demand and aggregate supply. When you hear the word aggregate, you should be thinking of total. The first thing that should come to mind, talk about total. Just imagine that, okay, all the demand of everybody, individual, firms, and so on. That's the aggregate demand. You understand? Then, the fifth difference here is that microeconomics helps to solve the central problem of what, how, and for whom to produce in the economy. You remember that problem, right? You remember that problem in Introduction to Economics, that the basic problem of economics is what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. The part of economics, the branch of economics that help you to answer this question is microeconomics. Of course, if you go back to the third difference, we said allocation of resources. So microeconomics helps you to allocate resources so that you know what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce in the economy. Now, what does macroeconomics do? It helps to solve the central problem of full employment of resources in the economy. Full employment of resources in the economy. One of the major misconceptions that most economic students or most people who read, talk about economic issues, when you mention full employment, what comes to the mind of many is that everybody in the economy is gainfully employed, working and receiving salary. This you should learn from today, from this early stage, so that you don't make the mistake when you enter into the economic world at large, that full employment does not mean everybody in the economy is working or is employed and receiving salary. What full employment means is that all the resources of the economy, including human and natural resources, are fully engaged, are fully employed. In other words, there is no wastage, there is no idle resources. But that is not always true, or that's not entirely true. It's not always true everywhere, and it's not true at all in the concept of Nigeria. When you talk of full employment, that all the resources are fully engaged. So human resources are not fully engaged. Our natural resources are not fully engaged. We have series of natural resource endowments scattered across Nigeria, some of which have not even been tapped. You understand? Our rivers have not been fully utilized. So most of the time, we are not having full employment. And that is what macroeconomics tries to do. How do we have full employment of resources in the country? Number 6, microeconomics discusses how equilibrium of consumer, producer, or an industry is attained. In other words, how does the equilibrium of a consumer, a producer, or an industry is actualized? At what point do you say a consumer is at equilibrium? At what point do you say a producer is at equilibrium? And at what point do you say an industry is at equilibrium? This what microeconomics tries to discuss. But when you go to macroeconomics, it is concerned with the determination of what? Equilibrium level of income and employment of the economy. You understand? Where micro is talking about the equilibrium level of consumer, producer, industry, where in macroeconomics is talking about the equilibrium level of income and employment of the whole economy. Now, number 7, price is the main determination of microeconomic problems. When you are talking about microeconomic, most of the time, it's always going to be P, function of P. This is a function of P. This is a function of P. Majorly. That's when you say function of P, that is being determined by price. I'm just saying quantity is a function of P. Quantity Q is a function of price P. That is how it is usually established. But when you come to macroeconomics, income is the major determinant of price of a macroeconomic problems. You understand? Of course. Why is it so? When you come to microeconomics, we are talking about individuals. We are talking about household and firms. What concerns an individual is the price of the commodity. You understand? It's the price of what? The commodity. If the price is a little bit low, he buys more. Now, for a firm is concerned with the price of factors of production, land, labor, capital, So, what are the prices of these factors? If the prices of these factors are low, it tries to employ more factors. But if the prices are high, it tries to cut down, the factors. So, these are the differences. I've been able to give you 7. Okay, let's give this 8 Examples of microeconomic variables are individual income, individual savings, price determination of commodity, individual firm's output, consumer equilibrium. Then when you talk about examples of macroeconomics variable, you talk about national income, national savings, general price level, aggregate demand, aggregate supply, poverty, unemployment, etc. These are macroeconomics indicators, or let's call them indicators. The microeconomic indicators, the macroeconomic indicators. Examples include, for microeconomics, individual income, individual savings, price determination of commodity, individual firms output, consumer equilibrium, etc. Then macroeconomic indicators include national income, national savings, general price level, aggregate demand, aggregate supply, poverty, unemployment, etc. So these are the major differences, or the key differences. We've been able to establish key differences between microeconomics and macroeconomics. Now, we want to quickly talk about the importance of microeconomics here, why it is important to study microeconomics, why it is relevant. One of the importance of microeconomics is price determination. Price what? Determination. Microeconomics helps in explaining how the prices of different commodities are determined. Some of us just go to the market and then get what we want, try to buy what we can buy with the money we have, without studying the microeconomic environment. Why am I saying this? Is that sometimes we don't even know what determines the factors that determines the prices of certain commodities. In my interaction with somebody, sometimes last year, those of you that used to buy perishable goods a lot, there was this time that they were selling one pepper to 200, one fresh pepper 200 naira. I don't know if you remember. The conversation was like, this one that the price of pepper is like this. Nothing goes up in Nigeria that comes down. It will never come down again. I said, no, sir. Though, usually we blame it on the government, and so I say, no, sir. Yes, we know that the country is bad, the government policies are not working, but the price of pepper cannot go up and stay there. This led to different kind of argument, and I discovered that, okay, of course, when somebody doesn't have the requisite knowledge of certain factors, or how prices are determined, or the microeconomic environment, they can actually talk like that. These are perishable goods. Which cannot be stored for long. That is one. Then two, the prices of commodities entices investors. For instance, at that time, you will be shocked that so many people want to quickly go into pepper business. Some people will start planting pepper because pepper is selling. There is profit in the pepper business. You understand? So many people some will even quickly form a mini irrigation to start selling, to start producing pepper. But the truth of the matter is, remember the relationship between supply and demand. When demand is high, it forces the price to go high, creating an artificial form of artificial scarcity. It goes, you understand, high price, low demand, low price, high demand. And when there is high demand, it forces the price to gradually go higher, because many people will start pushing in to supply that particular product. Gradually, it will create a kind of artificial scarcity along the line. And the price that was once low and the demand that was once high, the price will start going high. And because price is going high, many people will not be buying it much again. Demand will start going low. These are the interplay. This is what microeconomics helps you to understand. The same pepper we later bought almost a one big rubber for just 200 naira. Yes, it's going back again. What are those factors that are causing this? We are just entering the wet season. People are just planting now. We don't have a lot of irrigation farming in Nigeria. These are factors. When you know how these things work, you know how prices are determined. Now, this goes for almost all commodities. I'm just using pepper as an example. Number two, another importance is understanding. Microeconomics helps you to understand the workings of a free market economy. The workings of a free market economy. In other words, how free market economy works. Free market economy is that economy where the economic decisions regarding production of goods, such as what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, are decisions taken by private individuals. Private what? Individuals. These decisions are based on the preference of the consumer or demand for product. It is what the consumers need or demand that the firm or the industry will produce. This is what it implies. A free market economy is more like what we elementarily call capitalism, where the decision of what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce is taken by private individuals. In other words, you will say that the ownership of means of production is owned by, or means of production is owned by the private individuals. Microeconomics will now help you to analyze how these individuals, how these decisions are taken, and how these individuals, answer this question of what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. Then the next advantage is that microeconomics helps in efficient utilization of resources. Microeconomics helps in efficient utilization of what? Resources. It helps in explaining how scarce resources can be effectively and efficiently utilized by the producers in order to achieve maximum output. Remember that resources are generally scarce. Be it money, be it natural resources, they are generally scarce. Although in our country, I don't think human resources is scarce. You understand? You can employ as much as you want and you still have many unemployed graduates in the street or people who are not employed. Now, resources are scarce, and because of the ability of microeconomics to isolate and study a particular variable and the factors that affect that particular variable, that ability helps microeconomics analysts to be able to explain how resources are effective or can be effectively and efficiently utilized. Then another advantage is that that's number 4. Number 4, microeconomics helps in understanding building of model. We continue from there. We continue from there in our next class. Thank you very much.